We've got trade rumors. We've got Brandon Aiyuk interest. We've got mutual interest. We've got Deebo Samuel trade rumors. And what's next for the San Francisco 49ers if they're not trading a wide receiver? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there, and we always appreciate it when you subscribe on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up. We'd love you for that as well. And, of course, you can subscribe and find us anywhere you listen to your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet just in time for the tournament. That's $200 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right. I guess this is going to be, we talked about this, Croc. This is going to be the offseason of Brandon Aiyuk. And there's going to be trade rumors. There's going to be probably a public trade request at some point. There's going to be negotiations. Their negotiations, the 49ers reportedly are going to kind of wait on it, maybe do it in the summertime, which is kind of when they do their deals. Deebo might want to do it right now. He might want to push the issue before the draft. And now we're getting reports out of Jacksonville from the Jacksonville Jaguars flagship radio station and a reporter there saying that there's mutual interest, Croc, between Brandon Aiyuk's camp and the Jacksonville Jaguars, that this could be a real thing. The Jaguars picked 17th in the first round, Croc. We've actually identified before free agency the Jacksonville Jaguars as a spot where, all right, that first round pick starts getting up high enough, the 49ers would have to listen if a team like Jacksonville at 17 started offering a first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk. If the 49ers were willing to move off of Ayuk and potentially not do a big deal, if maybe they don't like his asking price. When you hear this sort of a report, Croc, what is your initial thought? Does Brandon Aiyuk to the Jaguars pass the sniff test to you?
I think these conversations go on in all NFL front offices, right? So they're thinking, how do we upgrade our receiver room? And they've made some splash moves, splash signings. They got Christian Kirk, and they went and got Ridley, and they went and got Zay Jones, right? Like, they were throwing a lot of weapons out there. Evan Ingram, who has been a terrific tight end for them as well. And you lose a guy, right? Like, there is no more Ridley out there. He's on a new team now. How do you get better? Who would fit? And who could we go after? And I think you start making phone calls to any team that may potentially have a guy that's available out there. And when you look at the 49ers situation with Brandon Aiyuk, even if the 49ers aren't willing to part ways, even if they don't want to part ways with him right now, I think it is a phone call from Jacksonville that you definitely need to have. So I do think that there's interest from their perspective. Now, as far as Brandon Aiyuk goes, of course there would be interest because you want to go where a team is not reluctant to paying you. Who's going to give me money? Jacksonville, they have no state taxes, right? And you've seen a lot of that floating around with Eric Armstead. And I remember when I would play games in Florida and my checks would look a little different because as a professional athlete, you get taxed different in each state. So if I just get done playing in California, that check looks different as opposed to if I just got done playing in Texas or if I just got done playing in Jacksonville. Now imagine that for an entire season, your checks look different than if you're being taxed in California. So just that aspect of it, right? Knowing even if the same amount of money goes further in a different state, and then what they're doing there in Jacksonville, it feels like they're kind of turning that curve a little bit. It feels like they're heading in the right direction. So if I'm Brandon Aiyuk and there's a place where they're going to get me to rock, they may feature me more than what I'm featured in San Francisco, and I can get paid more, there should be mutual interest. Now, is there mutual interest from the San Francisco 49ers? That's the team that nobody's mentioning, right? It's like, oh, yeah, Jacksonville, they're interested. Ayuk, mutual interest. He's probably like, okay, it doesn't sound bad. But the 49ers, if they're like, absolutely not, then you're locked up because you're on the 5th-year option.
So let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Does it make sense from their standpoint? And they did lose Calvin Ridley in free agency, but they added Gabriel Davis, right? And they've got Christian Kirk. They've already got a decent amount of money in their wide receiver group. Are they going to throw $25+ million a year on Brandon Aiyuk on top of that already? That might start to get a little bit too much potentially. And would they have done the Gabe Davis move so quickly if they thought they were going to do a bigger move and bring in a T. Higgins or draft a wide receiver at 17 or trade for someone like Brandon Aiyuk? That's a question I have. When it comes to Trent Baalke, we know him well, Croc, the GM now of the Jacksonville Jaguars, former 49ers GM. What can he not do? Draft wide receivers. So he might be smart to go look.
You mean you didn't like DeAndre Smelter?
What's that?
You didn't like DeAndre Smelter? You didn't like Quentin Patton?
Well, look, he was no AJ Jenkins, but he had some size at least. DeAndre Smelter did. What about former college point guard Bruce Ellington?
Bruce Ellington. That's a good one right there.
A basketball player than a football player.
Thought he was going to be the next Tyreek Hill.
Ronald Johnson?
Johnson.
Right? USC?
USC.
Yeah. The list is long. We could probably do this all day. I'm sure we'll see some names in the chat pop up here. Eric Armstead, Brandon Aiyuk joining Eric Armstead in Jacksonville. By the way, yeah, that was it. Great career for Eric Armstead as a San Francisco 49er. We talked about him getting released and kind of gave him his send-off as now we know he's going to the Jacksonville Jaguars now.
I saw someone ripping him on Instagram. They created like one of the Instagram reels and was just like, he wasn't good, hasn't been good, it has been terrible. And I'm like, well, you clearly don't understand the impact of what he does. He's not I think a lot of fans look at sack numbers, and if you look at his sack numbers, not very high, but what he does with taking on double teams, being stout versus the run, like, all the extra things. You'll see the tackles for losses. You see him have a lot of quarterback hits for someone at his position with not as many pass rush reps partly because he's hurt at times, but his value was deeper than just a sack number, at least in my opinion.
You know what else Trent Baalke loves, Croc? In a football player?
Long arms.
Brandon Ayuk's got he's got like a 7-foot tall wingspan, even though he's like 5'11 3/4 or something like that. So yeah, Brandon Aiyuk, I could see being a fit for Trent Baalke in the San Francisco 49ers. Niner Empire in the chat says Baalke's just waiting for Brandon Aiyuk to get hurt. So then that would he needs to be post ACL. Then he would be 100% a Trent Baalke guy. All right, enough on Trent Baalke. But it's something that I could see happening.
I think somewhere in there, he said we're going to run the football.
There we go. I knew I had a little Trent Baalke in there somewhere. Now, as far as the report goes, I have one big problem with the report, Croc, before you even get to the San Francisco 49ers side of it. I want you to tell me, Croc, how Brandon Aiyuk and the Jacksonville Jaguars could have mutual interest in each other when he is under contract with the San Francisco 49ers. That's something that sounds to me an awful lot like tampering, and not the legal kind, the illegal kind. If the Jacksonville Jaguars, if Trent Baalke is talking to Brandon Aiyuk and his agent without the 49ers permission, that is absolutely illegal. And I could see why Brandon Ayuk's side would want to be talking numbers to folks. And unless the 49ers, Croc, have already granted him permission to do so, because the Niners and the Jaguars have already talked trade a little bit. So let's get into that next.
We didn't know about Buckner. We had no idea about that.
We didn't know about Buckner. This could be a Buckner thing where all of a sudden, here's a deal that happened. Usually when the agent gets the okay, he spreads that news because he wants all 32 teams to know that he got the okay to look for a trade. But if there's we know how the 49ers operate, right? And if you only allow that one team to speak to your client, then maybe we wouldn't hear about it. And it would be a lot like DeForest Buckner. So let's go there. Let's go to the mutual part of this interest, Brandon Aiyuk's side and the San Francisco 49ers side. Also rumors about potential Deebo Samuel trade. Eventually, these two guys are not going to make a combined $60 million together on the 49ers roster. So something's got to give. Is it this offseason that happens, Croc? And more news and rumors surrounding your San Francisco 49ers next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with that 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Involves risk, including investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. So, do you think this is another DeForest Buckner situation with Brandon Aiyuk, Croc? Do you think the 49ers would get and would be willing to part ways with Brandon Aiyuk this offseason? Can a team, and is that pick the 17th in the first round of the NFL draft enough to say this draft pick is more valuable to the San Francisco 49ers than Brandon Aiyuk right now on an impending new contract? And the only way this report makes sense to me is if the 49ers and the Jaguars have already talked about this trade and allowed the Jacksonville Jaguars to talk with Ayuk's agents about a new deal to make this trade happen.
Well, first, let me address that last part. And the combine just happened. And everyone knows what goes on at the combine. You talk about tampering. It's tampering to the 10th power. You're throwing feelers out there. You're seeing who's interested. You have agents there, agents able to talk to other teams. And a lot of things is going on that's not supposed to. So as far as how this could have came about, I could see a scenario where Jacksonville and Ayuk's agent potentially had some conversation. So it is a little weird because of who the sources are. I looked up the sources on this and everything is it ain't Adam Schefter. It's not not Daniel Jeremiah, he's a draft guy, but who's it? Ian Rappaport. It's not Ian Rappaport. It's not even Glazer. It's some people from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I haven't heard Mayoko mention anything about that. Nobody on any side aside from Jacksonville Jaguar people. So from that standpoint, I'm like, we'll see. But I could see it be something that is true. You talked about DeForest Buckner. The 49ers, Calvin really just got $24 million a year. So what do you think Brandon Aiyuk and his camp are trying to come in at? I mean, 24, any 49er fans out there that thought that, this deal will be around 24 million, which is really what Deebo Samuel's million or average annual salary or whatever is. It's roughly 24, it's like 23 point something.
Yeah.
But with Ridley just signing for 24 million a year, what do you think Brandon Aiyuk is going to want that just came off of an all-pro season?
Yeah, if he signed tomorrow, I would guess something like 26 million a year, something like that. I think and that's kind of the number. Like it's
so now you're paying $50 million to Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel when the passing game isn't the staple of your offense.
Well, and Deebo Samuel's contract was backloaded, so his annual cap hit now is going to be even higher than what his annual salary was because the first year cap hit was a little bit lower. And you know, obviously, if you do a new deal with Ayuk, and that's why I've always talked about next offseason in 2025 is the year you trade Brandon or you trade Deebo Samuel. So they're both not hitting big money at the same time. So this year you can keep Ayuk's contract lower. You can backload that. You can keep them together while they're both not hitting at the same time. Then you trade Deebo Samuel next offseason. So they still stick together one more year. And then you leave Deebo. But maybe the 49ers just value Deebo more and they're not worried about that. And Brandon Aiyuk is not one of their top 2-3 options in the offense. And if a team comes with enough to make it more valuable than the third option in your offense, you have to seriously think about that. And what would it take? Is the 17th pick enough? I would be So looking at T. Higgins, I would say Ayuk would get paid more than Higgins. Ayuk would get paid more than Michael Pittman, who just signed. And Ayuk would collect more in trade than those guys that were on the franchise tags. So I would say probably a late 1 is what most people would put the value on Ayuk. I would say late 1, early 2 for T. Higgins potentially in a trade. So pick 17 is pretty good. That's a mid first round pick. I think that's something that would get John Lynch's attention if Trent Baalke called up and said, hey, we're willing to part with pick 17 in the first round. And the 49ers could sit there and say, hey, man, we might actually get a tackle, like a legit offensive tackle at 17, where we might not get that guy. We might be looking interior offensive lineman at 31. We may even get one of these superstar wide receivers that we like a lot that you can't get at 31. Maybe we get one of those guys at 17. They could maybe even move up from there potentially if they really want to do something. So it's fascinating. And they've got a lot of money spent on a lot of players. They're spending more this offseason, Croc. So I wouldn't say it's nothing. And as far as the reports go, I would think that John Lynch and the 49ers camp would be super hush-hush, would probably be telling the agent to be hush-hush. So maybe if there was a leak in a deal like this, maybe it coming from the Jacksonville Jaguars flagship makes a little bit of sense. That's where the only place the leak could come from was the Jaguars side of things.
We got Oscar in the chat, and he says pick 17, 96, and 115, and nothing less. I say that if you got 17 alone for Ayuk, that would be.
That's what I think it was. Pick 16 for AJ Brown, and I don't think AJ Brown's in. I don't think Brandon Aiyuk's in AJ Brown's territory when AJ Brown got traded.
Well, actually, if you go back and you look, AJ Brown was coming off of a year. I think he had 800 yards. In the previous 2 years, they weren't better than. He had no season that was better than Ayuk's one season.
Really,
especially with Ayuk coming off the last 2 years. What was it last year? Over 1,000 yards, and then this year the 1,350. AJ Brown didn't have kind of back-to-back seasons like that. It was kind of his first 2 years were good, and then that third year it was kind of a little weird or something.
Yeah, that's right. So he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Then he had 63 catches for 869 that year in 2021 when he got traded and then went crazy, 88 catches for almost 1,500 yards. In fact, he had almost identical receiving yards the last 2 years, 1,496 and 1,456. Last year, 106 catches and 11 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns. So, yeah, you're right, Croc. I didn't remember that. I think he was thought of as a better player than what those numbers are, obviously. And I think he might have been banged up a little bit that year to only have 63 catches with the Titans. And obviously the Titans have been in some problems with their quarterback position for a few years now. But yeah,
I think it would just be a pick. I mean, you can go where there's AJ Brown. You could think of Diggs as well in his situation. Amari Cooper, he was traded for a first-round pick. A lot of times, if they're going to give you a first for a receiver, it is just a first. You're likely not going to get a crazy haul for a receiver. At least not that I can think of off the top of my head. Edge rusher, if it was Nick Bosa, yeah. But and we're talking about players in their prime. There's been players past their prime. Keenan Allen just got traded. That may have been Greg Roman's doing, but Keenan Allen just traded from the Chargers to the Chicago Bears this evening as of Thursday night. Late round pick, 5th round pick or whatever. They probably feel like he's an older receiver. Where Brandon Aiyuk, he's peaking. He's just starting to peak now.
He hasn't even peaked yet.
Right.
And he's still a 1,300-yard guy and not even the number one option in his offense. Nick in the chat says, whatever the offer, it needs to make the 49ers better in 2024. See, that's the rub with draft picks, Croc, is they're not their best in their rookie seasons. A trade for a draft pick makes the 49ers better year 2, 3 from now, not year 1. And the 49ers are in a spot without first-round picks the last 3 years, without a second-round pick last year. I think that's why they've had to spend money on some certain positions this offseason, because they've had to make up for the lack of being able to draft defensive linemen, being able to draft offensive linemen the last few years with those early picks. And so they have to make up for that now. And maybe trading Brandon Aiyuk would be part of that as well. So
what you got from Mike McGlinchey, would you say, let's say hypothetically speaking, you draft you get pick 17 from Jacksonville. All right, hypothetically speaking, guys. You get pick 17 from Jacksonville. You get a Mike McGlinchey caliber tackle, essentially a guy who starts every game that he's healthy for you. Would that be worth trading away Brandon Aiyuk?
In my opinion, no. Brandon Ayuk's a better player than that. And if you add the contractual aspect of it, maybe it gets closer because now you have a player who's a starter on a rookie contract rather than a very expensive Brandon Aiyuk. Does that get it closer to make it even? I would probably still say no. I'd rather pay a good player than have a guy. You hope you get better than Mike McGlinchey is the way I would phrase that at pick 17. And this is a better offensive tackle class. And would you say as a prospect, Talise Fuaga or Amarius Mims are better prospects than Mike McGlinchey was? And would you trade Brandon Aiyuk for one of those guys? Because that's maybe what the Niners would be looking at there.
We have a Strawberries Reacts here. Oh, excuse me, right here. Here we go. Bay Gibson says 3 picks for AB. I love Brandon Aiyuk. He is not Antonio Brown.
Right. Oh, yeah. And the thing is
Mm-hmm.
he needs to go somewhere where he can get 150 targets to even be talked about in a situation like that. But he's probably going to get paid before he gets that.
Strawberry says, not even close with my Mike McGlinchey comment, but I would say if you get a guy that is a day one starter for you and starts every game for 4 years for you, that is healthy, of course. I think that's a positive draft pick.
It's a good draft pick, right? Like Mike McGlinchey was a successful draft pick. He wasn't a bust.
Yeah.
But you just hope when you draft an offensive tackle in the top 10 that you're maybe getting a better player than Mike
You
McGlinchey.
hope you get Joe Staley, who wasn't even drafted top 10, but you hope to get we have him for 10 years.
Would you trade Brandon Aiyuk for rookie Joe Staley? I would right now with where the 49ers are. I think that would be worth it. So that's the dice roll, right, of the NFL draft. All right, Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe that passes the sniff test. I still doubt it. And I do think 17 is a fair offer for Brandon Aiyuk if a team was to come with something like that. So, and I don't think the 49ers should expect more than pick 17 for Brandon Aiyuk, even though a lot of fans, I'm sure, want the moon for their players. And I understand that completely. Next, what about Deebo Samuel? His name has been bandied about in some potential trade rumors. And are the 49ers gearing up to make a big move at the safety position in free agency? Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. That's right, it's tourney time. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook because right now at FanDuel, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's right, $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all in the tourney, and all you got to do is win that first $5 bet to get that extra $200 to play with, and you can bet on NFL and draft props and basketball and baseball and anything you want at FanDuel, including the tournament. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. I am, Croc, going to call BS on the Deebo Samuel trade rumors. And there were some reports out there that numerous teams were sniffing around Deebo Samuel. And, the likes of the Baltimore Ravens. And there were a number of teams that were apparently circling the waters around Deebo Samuel. I saw what were the teams? Hold on, I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Baltimore Ravens, I saw that.
Baltimore Ravens was one. There was some other one. Now I don't have the tweet anymore, access to it. But I'm sure a lot of folks out there have seen it.
While you're looking that up, though, all right, why do you think that you kind of call BS on teams calling and being interested about Deebo?
That's the wrong way to phrase it. I could see a team calling. But these teams are too savvy and too smart. They're going to look at Deebo Samuel's contract situation and know that the 49ers aren't going to take they wouldn't save any money on the cap. It's like a $25 million cap hit for Deebo Samuel. So that's why I call BS on it. And teams are going to know that. They're going to do their homework. They're just not, it's not like a fantasy football league where they're just calling willy-nilly. Deebo Samuel's dead money, if he was traded today, would be $26.5 million. And they would only save $2 million against the cap. So if Deebo Samuel gets traded, it's going to be post June 1st, in which case you'd be getting draft picks for next year anyway. So why not let him play for you this year before you trade him next offseason? Because you're not going to get those draft picks before the next draft anyway. So that's why 2025 is the time to trade Deebo Samuel. Unless somebody comes again with something that is enough that you want to take a $26.5 million dead money hit this year on Deebo Samuel and only save $2 million against the cap. If you trade Brandon Aiyuk, you save $14 million. His entire fifth-year option money, you save all of that against the salary cap. So Brandon Aiyuk, if he gets traded, now's the time to do it. If not, you re-sign him, you trade Deebo next year. I mean, that's the only scenario that makes sense at all to me. Maybe a team would call just to check in. They like Deebo more than Brandon Aiyuk, but next year's the year for Brandon Aiyuk, in my opinion.
Do you think
Deebo Samuel.
most teams around the league are gonna like Deebo more than Ayuk? I don't. I think they like Deebo, the football player. I think everyone does. Like my brother is a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan. He hates everything 49ers typically, but he loves Deebo Samuel. Like he would take Deebo Samuel on the Dallas Cowboys right now. Not over CeeDee Lamb, but he loves Deebo. He loves the way he carries himself. He loves the way he plays. And I think that there are people around the league that see that same value in Deebo. Like just a guy, you're going to war. I want, regardless of if he doesn't run the best routes or whatever, but like you're going to war. I want Deebo going to war with me. Like that type of football player. So right. I could see some football heads really valuing him, maybe more so than some of the fans I'm looking at in the chat. Some of the things they're saying about Deebo. So the struggles will kind of get open at times. He's not Brandon Aiyuk down the field. He's not those things, but just as a weapon and a football player and the impact he's had on a lot of playoff games, like meaningful games for the 49ers. You're playing against Philadelphia Eagles. He's been talking all offseason about how, the trash, the DBs are trash, they this, they that. Then he goes out there and goes for like 150, 160 and 3 touchdowns. Like he's that kind of guy. And I do think more people would like him than 49er fans think.
Oh, no doubt. But it depends what you want. Like we know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Deebo's a special player. He's a unique player and he can do a lot by himself. You know, getting open against man coverage is maybe not his strongest suit. So if that's the kind of player you want, you're calling the 49ers about Brandon Aiyuk. If you want maybe the better football player, and maybe the guy the 49ers, do you think Kyle Shanahan prefers Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk?
Deebo Samuel.
Right. So I think
I think Kyle likes it. Kyle likes a certain type of person and player, like a football. He likes a certain guy. And I think Deebo exemplifies what he wants in everybody.
That's one aspect of this whole thing, Croc, that we don't really know. We know Kyle Shanahan, and he's talked about how he's good buddies with Deebo Samuel, and they've obviously already gone through the weird offseason and re-signed him, and he's under contract for 2 more seasons. And the 49ers love Deebo Samuel, love the way he plays. Kyle Shanahan loves Deebo. Brandon Aiyuk was in the doghouse at one point. I wonder if there's still something that just maybe Ayuk, and maybe that's why they don't find more ways to get him the football. Maybe there's just something that Kyle Shanahan he doesn't like about Ayuk as much as he likes about Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, and he's behind those guys for a reason. And if that's the case, he wants to stick with the guys he likes the most, the guys he likes to scheme things up for, and he'd be willing for the right offer to move off of Brandon Aiyuk if it meant that he could keep other pieces, including defensive pieces on the team, and not have to, do another big contract. So that's just an answer I don't know.
Here's the one thing about, circling back to Ayuk. I have talked a lot about how I don't care for the 49ers usage of Brandon Aiyuk. And you kind of go back years, you go to Atlanta Falcons, and I know there's Julio Jones. Okay, he's an all-time great. But the way they utilize him, it almost was like, well, Kyle has no choice but to use him this way because this guy is so special. And maybe with Brandon Aiyuk, he would be more willing to move off him because maybe he just doesn't see special. Maybe he sees good. Hey, you're good. You can do a lot of things good in this offense, but you're not special enough for me to build this offense around you or this passing game around you, as opposed to a Deebo Samuel with the way that he plays and the way I can get the ball in his hands. Christian McCaffrey, the things I could do for him. Maybe that's what it is. So maybe Kyle would be more willing. And this is not saying that he doesn't think Ayuk is good. I think everybody thinks Ayuk is good. You know, it's how good does Kyle think he is?
And can some team pay the price that is worth more than what Kyle thinks Brandon Aiyuk is worth? And in the end, the 49ers themselves have said everybody's got a price.
They don't,
except for Nick Bosa, apparently.
They do not build the passing game around him. He's really kind of an X receiver. And what I mean by X, like he's stationary more times than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just lined up on the ball, whether he's outside, whether he's tight split, whether he's in the slot. He is the point man. He is the guy that is on the ball. They don't build a passing game around him with motion him down to a tight split, get him free releases, get him versus favorable matchups in space. You know, just all those things that you see other teams build a passing game around their receiver. Keenan Allen, just talked about him. Watch a Chargers game and how they built that passing game around him. Maybe Greg Roman just getting to the Chargers with Harbaugh was like, we don't want to use him like that. And is he still super valuable? I threw out CD Lamb's name earlier, how my brother, he doesn't like Deebo more than CD, but he loves Deebo or whatever. But CD Lamb, watch how the Cowboys use him. The 49ers, watch how they use Ayuk, and they don't use him like they feel like he's a special receiver.
Not the focal point of the offense. And I will say that there's an aspect of Ayuk's game, not that it's his fault at all, but he has one of the easier jobs as far as big-time wide receivers in the NFL because teams can't focus on him. He's singled up more than any of the guys that are receiving 1,000 yards per season, right? Would you agree with that? Like nobody in defensive meetings, they're not like, we got to stop 11 first. They say, we got to stop 19. We got to stop 23. We got to stop 85. And 11 is pretty good too.
Well, maybe that's why they don't motion him around and stuff, right? Like CD Lamb, I know I keep using his name, but you kind of have to motion him around because if you don't, teams will just be able to bracket him a lot easier.
A couple more reports real quick here. One from Matt Mayoko about a linebacker. Obviously, Eric Kendrick backed out of his deal with the San Francisco 49ers, went to the Dallas Cowboys. The 49ers are showing strong interest in former Packers linebacker Devondre Campbell, a source says. 8-year veteran. He was an all-pro a couple of years ago. Not great in coverage. I don't know if he's a great fit for the 49ers, but clearly they're trying to find themselves a veteran presence at linebacker with some unknowns with Dre Greenlaw. So Devondre Campbell could be a future 49er. And something else that we're going to have to talk about more, I think, after the weekend, Croc, and that is a report from Michael Silver, who's been plugged in with the 49ers and been pretty right about a lot of stuff this offseason. He says in one of his recent articles that the 49ers are going to remain aggressive and that the safety position might be something that they're in on. I mean, we were talking maybe Justin Simmons or Justin Blackman or Quandre Diggs or something like that. And then you think, well, wait a second, they just drafted a third-round safety, and of course you got Talanoa Hufanga, right? But how about this quote? Safety Talanoa Hufanga, 24-year-old who earned first-team All-Pro honors in 2022 coming off a torn ACL and isn't assured of reclaiming his starting job. Talanoa Hufanga getting Wally pipped?
Injuries happen. My thing, Wally pipped by who?
Jair Brown, I guess.
No.
Not Odom.
I don't think
having the roster at safety.
And this is not saying Jair Brown is bad or anything like that. I didn't see him do anything that says, he has to, like, oh man, this is a guy that's pushing Brock Purdy, right? Like Trey Lance was a guy, he goes down with an injury, and Brock Purdy comes in and he's balling, and it's like, peace out, right? Yeah. Who nobody's pushing. Nobody at the safety position that I've seen has pushed Hufanga out of there for you to even like make that statement. So that's kind of, maybe they just want him to really attack your rehab. So you're the same guy, coming back. Maybe that's where their thinking is. But, and I'm not even saying like Hufanga is this amazing safety. I think he's a good safety. I think he has good versatility. He's done some special things in a couple of areas that I've seen, especially certain players. I always talk about that Seattle Seahawk play. He's lined up in the slot over Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett, it's essentially zero coverage, and Lockett has a two-way goal on him, and he jumps the underneath route, goes off his hands, and Gibson ends up picking it off. Like that's a special play. So he has done some special things whether it's in space or tackling. And that's not to say that he's like a pure coverage guy,
Yeah.
but I haven't seen special things or plays or reps from any other safety. So unless you're telling me that they're going to sign Simmons, and even then I would feel like it's Simmons and Hufanga. Like,
Right.
who is pushing Hufanga out of there right now?
Yeah, that's wild. So that's one I did not expect to see, and I would have called BS on that one, except it's coming from Mike Silver, who's been as right as anybody this offseason. So I think you got to take a serious look at that one.
There's two people I listen to when they say something. Gosh, why am I blanking on my guy's name? Denver Broncos.
Ben Albright.
Ben Albright. If Benjamin Albright says it, I listen. And Silver right now, he says it, I definitely listen.
Silver's on a heater, so we'll see if he's right. That's a big one. That's a bomb and something that I hadn't heard, hadn't thought about, and didn't even consider that the 49ers would move off Hufanga. Maybe Adam Peters in Washington. They've got 6, including one of the 49ers picks, 6 picks in the top 100. Maybe it's a situation where a team comes calling for Hufanga and they're willing to move off of Hufanga, and then they replace him with a free agent safety or something like that. Who knows? So a lot to still be determined. Might get real interesting, guys, with some trades potentially on the horizon for those San Francisco 49ers. If any of that happens, of course, we'll be back Monday to cover it all. And we've got a ton of prospects that we're ready to give those scattering reports on, because we're in draft mode as well here. And we'll talk to you then. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Croc and I back Monday, Sunday night, live probably right here. Locked On 49ers.